This is the High Value Man Conversation Podcast, a show dedicated to the mission of building high-value men. Men that are courageous, committed, and uncompromising in their pursuit of greatness.
You run the day and stop having the day run you.
Monday, get better. Tuesday, get better. Wednesday, get better.
Everybody's great when they're not tired. Champions is when they're tired. That's when the real champions come out.
The next day, get up, get up, get up, get up. Keep going.
Win. I'm going to win.
You're not as far away from these dreams as you think you are.
One great man means a great family, a great neighborhood, a better city, community, state, and the world. The question is, if not you, then who? Welcome back to the High Value Man Conversation. I'm Aaron.
Josh Lashua. Glad to be with you again.
Happy to be with you guys. Today we're talking about the 6 human needs. So we all have fundamentally 6 human needs. There are 4 that have to be met for you even to think about the top 2, but there are 6 needs that are driving all of your decisions in your life. I mean, like your relationship, the work that you choose, those good decisions, those bad decisions. We're going to be talking about understanding your needs, why you need to really understand the order of them, why they're so important, the healthy roadmap and the unhealthy roadmap for them, and also how they affect your relationship, which is going to be the big talking piece. Because if you're struggling in your relationship, conflict, confrontation, problems, maybe you self-sabotage, pull that ripcord, get out a little bit too early. Maybe you do. It's because you are more than likely trying to fulfill one of your human needs. And if you don't understand what's operating under the surface, then you're going to keep repeating the same bad behavior and take laps in the desert.
I love that. This is honestly one of my favorite topics to discuss of all time. I think just realizing that what we're going to walk through today, Aaron, it's so foundational, and you mentioned already, in how we think, be, and do our life. Mm-hmm. It's involved in every emotion that we have. It's involved in every brain process that we make, decisions we make. It is so intricate to the fundamental part of who every individual is. And I love that we all share all of these needs. There's not a need here that you have. There's not a need here that you don't have. So we'll talk about that and how it really flows in a fluid scale for our lives and what each one means. And so it's going to be a great conversation. You're going to really want to digest this, chew on it, think about it, spend time re-listening through the podcast again, re-listening to the message again. There's so much meat in what we could talk about. I feel like we could probably talk about this for 6 hours if we wanted to, but we won't do that to you today.
Love it. And we were talking about that too, is because this, I believe Maslow really talked about this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. There's a pyramid. You've probably seen at some point, maybe Psychology 101, but it's a pyramid that talks about the foundation that everybody needs is really, you got to have your basic needs met. So level of certainty. So we're going to touch on that being your first one of the 6, is that certainty. You got to have your basic needs met from a foundational standpoint. This means you got to know where you're sleeping at night. You got to be fed. You got to be watered. But that's the idea behind this, is that there are needs that are stacked on top of each other. Before you can reach that point of self-actualization, fulfillment, contribution to the world, like there are basic needs that you need to understand the order around before anything else can really be achieved. That's
certainly true. So yeah, after food, water, shelter, and sex, you got those. You're in a sustainable place. Then we can really dive down into who we are as individuals, what makes us tick, what is churning in our brain unconsciously or subconsciously that affects everything we are consciously, and that's to our world, to our relationships, to the marketplace, to our bodies, etc. So cool. Let's get after it.
Cool, man. All right, well, Josh, why don't you take us away, talk us through what are the 6 human needs. Let's expose everybody to what they are, and then we'll dive into the positives, the negative ways, and the blueprints for meeting them.
Yeah, I love that. So if you're driving, make note of it, circle back, re-listen to this when you can actually write these down, because I want you to write these down, make note of them so you can review them again. But the top listed need, fundamental need, is certainty. Certainty is the need to know what to expect. Certainty people, this may be you, but certainty people, Aaron, really like their calendars. They like their habits. They like their schedules. They like to know what's coming, what's to expect. Certainty individual doesn't do real well with curveballs in life. Spontaneity.
Yeah.
They want to know if we have plans in 2 weeks, we're going to dinner, where we're going to dinner, what time we're going to dinner, what should I wear, kind of thing. If there's something at the office, it's great. I got a meeting in 2 weeks. What do I need to prepare for it? Do I need a slide point? What are we talking about here?
Certainty wants to see the menu before you go to the restaurant. And so like they want to know if date night is happening, you're in a relationship with a high certainty person. Like they want to know what restaurant, what the temperature, exactly what you said, what to wear, but what's on the menu, because does it fit their diet plan and can they have it? So
absolutely.
Yep.
That's certainty. So certainty sits here on the spectrum. And then we have our novelty people. Novelty people, love spontaneity. They're the opposite end of that certainty side. They want to go new places, meet new people, have new experiences. The mundane of life can feel really like a drag on them. If you're a novelty person going to the same restaurant, you're probably not going to order the same thing more than once. You want to try variations on the menu. You typically just desire to have new experiences, not just desire, you have a need for new experiences, likely with new people in new settings, creating new circumstances really feeds into you. You're the kind of individual that really loves to go into a big room filled with tons of people you don't know so you can get to know these people.
Yeah. Also a need for adventure. So novelty is like the adventure side. Like I want to feel that adrenaline by doing something new where I don't know what the outcome is going to be. Completely opposite of the certainty side. We have a need for both. They're just in different orders. And that's a big thing to touch on too, is that all of these are needs and we all want them in our life, but the order that we prioritize is going to be drastically different based on the individual.
Yeah, for sure. After that, the next need that we have is fundamental, is our need for significance. And we all have it. Again, fluid scale, we'll touch on that here shortly. But the need for significance is, if you're a high significance person, you have a high need to feel valued, to feel important. That's in your relationships. That's of course in your home for sure, but in the marketplace, in your business office, in any room that you roll into where there's one other person besides you, whether it's one person or 10,000 people, you have a need to bring value, feel important, and know the room values you the way that they see you.
Yeah,
high significance.
High significance. Love that. Okay. And then after significance.
So after significance, another end of the spectrum is the need for connection and love. A connection and love person really draws their need is met by serving others, but also knowing that in that service that they are bringing value. So their value is more action based than even maybe even mental based. So a connection love person is someone who goes out of their way to love on an individual so that they feel closer to that individual.
Closeness is a huge driving force in the connection and belonging. And again, we all have this need, but they want to feel closeness with a partner, with a community, with the tribe, with a relationship. They want to feel included. Inclusion is a big part of that need for belonging.
For sure. Moving on to the next one. Next one is, it can be more spiritual, but it's certainly a foundational need, and that's our need for growth. We have a need to progress in the areas of our life, to progress in our intellect, to progress in our relationships, progress in our marketplace, progress our bank accounts, to progress, to always be moving forward. There's a fear attached to, if I'm not growing, then I'm not living.
Dying. Yeah. What's not growing is dying. Cool.
Yeah. And then the last one that we have, the last fundamental need that we have, number 6, is the need to serve others. Yeah. It's a need to, and this can look like connection love, but it's not. They're completely separate. A person who has a high need to serve will go out of their way to bring value to people. And so serving could be anything from, I'm going to make your lunch for you, I'm going to go clean your car, I'm going to work extra because I know it'll take a burden off of you. Whether you said it or not, I have a feeling like I can serve you this way. Maybe it's out in the community, serving. That could be in your home, again, that could be in your business, but truly actionable items to do something for others. It's an extension of themselves in action to be in a servanthood.
I love that. And also, the other way that I understand this, the 6 human need of service is contribution. So you think about the legacy movement, the Mother Teresa ideal of how can I really contribute back to society, to the world, and give my gifts. And so like, this is like the peak, I think, that we all deeply desire. So what is our spiritual gifting that we're going to give to the world is that level of contribution and service to the greater community. And I do want to just touch on this because I know Tony talks about it. So if we look at those first 4, certainty, uncertainty, connection, belonging, significance, those are like the base to the
pillars.
They're the pillars, right? So those have to be met first before you ever think about growth. Nobody that's not getting fed every night and that is not having like their basic needs of shelter being met, that isn't part of a tribe, they're not thinking about growth, they're not thinking about contribution to the greater world. So if you really want to impact like a greater number of people, or to really get above yourself, like these 4 basic needs need to be understood first and foremost, which is you got to understand yourself, your blueprint for meeting them, the order of priority that you have, so that you can really be a contributing member to society.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And so again, as I mentioned, we all share these needs. Nobody hearing my voice has one of these needs we've listed and says, that's not me. You have all 6. Now, what you need to understand is it's a fluid scale.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be 2. Everyone's going to have a primary and a secondary that are the most important to you. And you can think about the fluid scale of 1 being, that's really low for my needs, Aaron, but maybe, 10 is I've got to have this in my life, or like maybe I'm in freak out mode.
Yep.
And so as you look at each one of these, certainty, novelty, servanthood, connection, love, growth, and service, You need to scale yourself. Is this a 1 for me? Is this a 10 for me? Or where do I fall in the middle of that?
Yeah.
That will help you get eyes on your order.
Yeah.
And you're going to have 2. Just expect to have 2 that are really high, somewhere between 7 and 10. These are really high for you. So just have that expectation as you think about these, and maybe go back and re-listen to the definitions of where I fall in my order.
Yeah.
And then second to that, once you understand your order, or you have a grasp of what these needs are, is understanding your roadmap to filling them.
That's good.
So we all have different ways that we get these needs met. We have roadmaps that we created for ourselves that help us meet these needs. So being conscious of them is a huge deal, because you want to be conscious of them. You don't want to be living in a life of default, or this is just how I do things. This is just how I am. That's not who a high value man is. You got to understand yourself so you can understand the rooms that you're in, continue to bring value to them, and also at the same time not be blinded by how other people are because you think, oh, that's just the way that they are. You'll understand yourself first so you can understand your partners, your relationships, and your marketplace.
I love that. I love that. So knowing your order is so important. So I can share with you, previously to doing some work, I can tell you my number one need has been certainty. Like, I want to know what it's going to look like. And so high certainty can be, again, the scheduling, the programming, the being able to really map out a vision. So vision is a big part of what we talk about. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is what it's supposed to look like. But the supposed to what it's look like is also very high control. And so certainty and control typically dance together a lot. And so there's this idea, like, I need it to look a certain way for me to feel certain and safe to meet my need, which means I want to control as much as possible. And you can see where this can show up in a relationship dynamic as a very negative thing, because my need for certainty is really high. And my partner's need for certainty is very high, which is very traditional in a dynamic between male and female. Women's number one need is
security,
safety. And security. So certainty is always going to be very high for your woman. Mm-hmm. So in that dynamic, we both have a really high need for certainty and control. There's going to be an opportunity to really combat each other.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. What's your second need?
Second need, prior to doing some work, was connection, belonging. And so I think that is a very noble thing. Like, I love being part of a tribe. I'm a romantic. I love love. But when certainty and connection, belonging are my number one and number two need, and it was unconscious, I would meet my need for certainty and my need for connection, belonging in very unhealthy ways. Because it was operating as like a primary need, and I wasn't conscious of it. So from a certainty standpoint, this is how a relationship needs to look like, because I need to feel like connection and close with you. So it'll be a lot of control. A lot of control rather than the fluidity that needs to happen in a relationship dynamic.
That's wild. Aaron and I definitely, we talked about this before we started recording, but I find it interesting that we have linked up and weaved our lives together, and your needs being certainty and connection, love, and my needs are novelty and significance. So the four needs we both share for sure, but they're opposite ends of that spectrum, which I find very interesting that turned out that way, because I didn't put that together till right now, which is really wild. So my number one
and
need,
it's typically how it works in a relationship dynamic, in a masculine, feminine, not saying that you're feminine or masculine, but just in the dynamic of relationship, that's typically what attracts, right? It's opposites attract. And so you think about that, understanding not only your order, but your roadmap for meeting them in healthy and unhealthy ways means, hey, Josh, I have a very high need for certainty, which means my expectation that I don't want to place on you, but for myself, looks like this sometimes. And I know that you've got a very high need for novelty, which I understand from what I know about you may look like this. Here's potential areas where we could clash and where we could really work together in a really beautiful dynamic.
That's great. I don't want to dive down this road, but I definitely want to give it to every man who's listening here, because likelihood of you being in a relationship, specifically a romantic relationship, is very high. If you're not in one now, you're going to be in one. Is that the things that, so yin to yang, as we just talked about, this is for you. So take note of this. The things that draw you to each other in the beginning will become a place of contention at some point. So what that means is the things that really attracted us to ourselves. So I am one of my needs, my second need, is novelty. Shocking that my wife would be a high certainty. That attraction of her, she's got things in order. I really like that, because I didn't. I like to flow off the cusp, like the wind in the air. If it goes left, it goes right. I'm down with it. Let's roll. I didn't do well in scheduling. I didn't do well in my financial world initially. So she brought that certainty in. I just find that really, really interesting. But then really, this is for you guys in relationship. Know that what drew you together in the beginning, because as we do life, we have our expectations, will at some point become a place of contention. So don't make your spouse or your partner pay a price for who they are and what they bring to your relationship, because you become complacent with who they are. Realize who they are, what the strengths that they bring, because that's what you wanted in the first place. And again, don't make them pay the price for it, because their greatness is being important to your life.
I love that. I love that. And just another reminder that your level of personal development will set the tone and the stage for the relationship.
That's very true.
Okay, so we got certainty and the 6 human needs. And I shared a little bit around the poor roadmap for meeting both certainty and connection, belonging. Your need for novelty being high for you. Paint a picture for the listeners. How has that shown up in maybe a negative framework, or not finding a healthy roadmap for meeting that need?
So just for the listeners, my top 2 needs: number 1 is significance, number 2 is novelty. So speaking on novelty specifically, is that because I have such a high need for new experiences, a negative for a novel person can be making decisions without the consideration of others, taking action on something without the consideration of others. So especially if you're part of a team, if you're part of a tribe, you're part of a group, you're married, you're in a relationship, life, Aaron, is not lived inside of a vacuum. It would be really nice for a novelty if it worked that way. I can go live freely, I can go be a wanderer and not affect anyone. It doesn't work that way.
Sure.
So a negative part of that is I've got to consider, in the midst of my own needs, those that I do life with, because I will certainly impact them with my decisions. So that's a negative side. If you're a high novel person, being aware of your movements. When you turn left, when you turn right, there's people behind you. You're creating a wake, you're creating a draft that affects others.
Love that. What about significance?
So significance, so positives of significance is that there's not a room that I walk into that I don't have a need to bring value to, which we talked about in the definition. A negative for a significant is that you could find me overworking. You can find me going beyond myself so that my need feels like it's being met. So in the workplace, I have been in cubicles. I have worked for other people. I don't need more because I know it's not what's best for me. But in the years that I did that, I would find myself giving more, showing up more. And again, these aren't bad traits. I was well intended in what I was doing, because I'm still bringing value. But I would get so deep down the rabbit hole in how I felt, my title, the power that comes with that, the paychecks that come with that I would get so wrapped up in what I'm doing here that everything else in my life would pay the price, So I'd feel significant at work. I'd feel significant in my groups with my men. But then the price being paid is that I'm not taking care of my body. I'm spending way too much time in a chair. I'm not building my relationships that bring a lot of value to me. I'm not spending as much time with my wife and my children as I say that I would like to.
Yeah.
Because this is what makes me feel so good about myself.
And also the other side of that too is you could have a very high need for significance with your physical appearance and love the attention drawn from this. Well, that can be a positive thing, can also be a very negative thing if that becomes the only source of your connection with other people.
Yeah, and think about even modern day with social media. If that's the thing for me and I'm posting all the time and I'm getting my likes and my comments on my social media, it's hit me, I'm liking it, all of a sudden that becomes like a king in my life. That becomes what gets my priority. And if I'm not taking the time to be met at home or with my relationships with that, then I will nurture this before I'll nurture the other one.
Right. And then that's a slippery, every one of these needs has a slippery slope. The devil knows your flavor, right? So if your need for significance is high, social media becomes this vacuum where you're being externally validated in any capacity. The next thing you know, your entertaining and engaging relationships are not productive.
Yeah.
That, again, feeds the ego. So again, we all have these needs in different orders of priority, and it's just a matter of understanding which is your number one, number two, and et cetera.
No, for sure. No, that's great. That's great. Want to touch on growth and servanthood a little more?
Yeah.
So for any of us have a need for growth, I talked about that's a need to progress, a need to learn. You might find somebody, my wife's number 2 need is growth. And I love that. Y'all, I married a doctor. She's brilliant. She has always sought to be more intellectually sharp, season to season to season to season. She has such a high need for growth that became a place of contention in our relationship. I was talking to Aaron about this, is that my wife has a need to be a part of coachings, events, go places and learn, get new certifications, always in a realm of growth in who she is. And in a new marriage, especially, it's not everybody, but certainly for us, we didn't have 2 nickels rubbed together. But my wife had such a high need is that we were doing things that we didn't have money in savings in an early season of our life because we were doing these things. And that could be a negative for a growth person. Now, a positive for a growth person is that you're typically going to be a producer. You're always going to be leaning into something, growing. Stagnant life is likely the fear of a growth person. If I'm not going forward, I'm going backward, and I just can't have that. But you can also realize if you have such a high need for growth, that likely there's a price being paid somewhere else.
There's always a price being paid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking about this right before, is that if growth is high, so previously I said that certainty and connection, belonging were at the top of my list. After doing some reframing, because I realized that certainty being a number one really is very limiting, I am consciously moving growth and connection, belonging as my number one, number two, because I look at growth from a standpoint of everything is growing rather than the idea that it has to look a certain way. But I think about the growth from a negative side. You're constantly gathering information and not actually deploying and stepping into the world and doing something productive with
That's a big deal. I think about so many people that, Aaron, that go to college for an extended amount of time. They'll go to college, they'll get their bachelor's, then they'll get their master's. They may go and forth and get secondary certifications, maybe even go and get their doctorate. But at what point are you going to take what you've learned, what you've gathered, and go sow it into the world so that you can produce something? Don't get caught in the stagnant. If you can be stagnant growth. You're growing intellectually, but you're not growing your production.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Service.
So service.
Yeah.
So this need, as I talked about already, service is the need to serve others. Think about people. Think about Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Great example is she clearly had a high need to be in front of people, taking care of them, bringing what she could to them. There's plenty of people that we could use that we could place our names in that, but her significance was really in what she could do for other people. And again, this is not a connection or love. This is a contribution type. And so service is a really great thing. We all want to be served on some level, but if we're serving so much that we're paying a price, that other areas of our life are paying a price, that's where it becomes a negative.
Yeah.
I think about people that serve in church. I go to a large church, so does Aaron, but people who come in can be really on fire for this community. They get so much out of it and want to give back to it, that they'll come in, they'll join 2, 3, 4 teams, they'll join book studies, prayer groups, etc. And all of a sudden they're part of all of these groups, but then they're not spending any time at home. What they're making in the marketplace goes down because this becomes the place that really helps them feel like they're significant. They're always giving of themselves, giving of their time.
That's touching on a few different human needs, right? So we got like this contribution, this kind of peak state of all of our needs of really giving to others. There's a contribution. Then there's also the significance, what I heard you say, is because I'm serving to others, like I feel important, and like that is a high need for significance. Person, if you have a high need for significance, the feeling of feeling important is really like, it's an important piece of it. It really is.
It could also be connection love.
Connection, love, and connection, love. So now we're touching on 3 human needs in this. When I give of self and I'm serving at a great capacity, it's feeding my significance, connection, belonging, and my need for contribution. That's where when you do something that feeds multiple needs at once, from a negative lens, it can be addictive, but also from a very positive lens, it can be very addictive. It becomes something like, I want to do more of this because it's creating such a sense of autonomy in doing the act.
Yeah, and that's the definition of a roadmap. What Aaron just explained is a roadmap for that individual of how they get these things. We all have roadmaps. We all have things that we do, habits that we've created in our schedule and things that we do every single day to get those needs met.
Yes.
And they can either serve us or they can hinder us.
Yep.
So being aware of those, because as I'm talking to you, I guarantee you've probably got several of them, if not a dozen or more of them. So we got to become aware of them.
Yeah.
So they may be feeding in, but they may not be serving you.
Right. And this is where understanding your human needs first and foremost is fundamental to understand. Is the roadmap that you're using the most effective tool to get what you want? And so this comes back to our framework, right? We understand that vision is step number 1. You got to know the direction that you're moving in. You operate from your core values so that you're not living a life of default, but design, and then stack consistent victories. We're going to talk about this as we always talk about it, but it comes back down to, is the roadmap I'm using going to help me achieve the vision that I want? So I think about a negative roadmap, and that can feed the need of certainty, significance, even connection and belonging, even growth, from the standpoint of so many men work so hard in a career, a job, a line of work, because it feeds their need for certainty. They know they can show up and produce. They get the accolades from the other men inside the tribe or the other people inside of the business that they're in. They're patting them on the back, like, congratulations, good job closing the deal. And so we got significance built in this, connection, belonging. There's the aspect of certainty, and they're growing inside the space, but then their family is completely neglected.
Yeah.
Or their health is neglected. They're making the money, so they got the finances category dialed in. They might even be achieving in a certain direction, but their family is just this neglected part of their entire ecosystem.
Yeah, that's very true. And guys, you'll hear us talk about some of our 4 pillars: faith, family, fitness, and finance. Is that inside each one of those, your needs may be different.
Yeah.
Right. So in your faith, you can look at your needs, break those down, break those 6 needs down. In your family, break those 6 needs. Where do you land with your family on all 6 of those?
Good.
In your fitness, where do you land in all 6 of those? In your finance, Where do you land with all 6 of those? Really get to understand yourself. If you don't understand yourself well, then you'll never truly be a chiseled hammer ready to go after life. You'll be living a life by default. You'll be letting your circumstances and your situations dictate who and how you show up in every room that you're in. And if you want to be a high value man, I'm speaking over you that you're going to be, it's in front of you, is really getting to understand yourself. And once you've grasped onto yourself, then you can turn and you can look at your partner and try to get to understand them and why they operate the way that they do. You've probably seen them and heard their bids for their needs to be met that have likely been met in conflict for let's say probably for years. But if you understand who you are, who your partner is, and we can walk through these things, we have an opportunity to weave them so that they complement each other. Yeah. And that's what gets you down the road.
Yeah, I love it. And that's exactly what we're going to touch on. This third piece is first you got to understand the human needs high level, know your order, the roadmap that you're using to achieve each of your needs. But the third piece is how your 6 human needs affect your relationship. Yeah. And we're going to touch on that, spend some time on that. But that's mostly what we're going to be talking about inside of our High Value Men private community as well. Yeah. Is your relationship dynamic. We understand fundamentally that one of our core human needs is connection, belonging, love, relationship. And it's also the part that I'd say stimulates the most amount of growth. You think about breakups, build businesses and bodies. When your spouse or your partner is getting your attention because she's pissed off, angry, frustrated because of something you did, you're like, okay, what do I got to work on? Well, relationship is a core piece that we're going to be talking about throughout this podcast and conversation as well as the coaching. But your 6 human needs are driving the decisions in your relationship that are either bringing closeness or conflict and confrontation.
That's absolutely true. And as we're recording this, I don't know when you're going to be listening to this. As we're recording this, we're in February, so we're approaching this.
So we had a slight technical difficulty last time we're filming this, and so this is actually part 2 of the episode talking about the 6 human needs, but we're going to hop right back in because we got a great story. And I think it was actually a divine intervention to be able to give us a really relevant story of how your 6 human needs affect your relationship and can either create closeness or conflict.
Yeah, you mentioned that. So a rolling blackout is not going to stop us, which is great. High value man pushes forward, and that's what we're doing today. So yeah, Aaron, we're at the point of our conversation where you talked about our 6 needs are going to do one of 2 things. There's an opportunity. It's a Y in the road. It's either going to create conflict in our relationship or it's an opportunity to create connection in our relationship. Yes. And just so happens the blackout shut us down in that moment. And we're back today continuing the conversation to wrap up our conversation. And just happens, what a coincidence, which I don't believe in coincidences, that last night at 1:30 in the morning, I had the opportunity for conflict or connection. So my wife woke me up at 1:30 in the morning. I was in the deep of my sleep because she'd had a bad dream. She had a bad dream that she had checked our GPS and I was in a place that I shouldn't have been, an apartment, which...
I want to pause there for just a second. One of the things that I love and respect so much about Josh and many men in the circle that we roll with is they have active GPS turned on with not only where their wives can see where they're at, but all of their friends. Just as a security measure, you talk about this being intrusive accountability, a higher level of like, you know what, I already know that I'm going to live the high value man lifestyle and I'm not going to put myself in stupid situations, but also to reinforce that and provide the safety and security which all women need and want. Yeah. I'm just going to share that information.
And I love that. And the biggest reason why I do it is because I've given you accountability of about 12 men in my life. If you ever notice me in a place you probably wonder, why am I there? Call me. Yeah. Ask me. Again, it's just a part of brothership, part of intimacy. So it's a great part of our relationship. So I'm glad to do that with you. But yeah, so in the dream, my wife had checked my GPS and I happened to be in a place that she didn't recognize, an apartment complex. She calls me in the dream and I answer and she asks me what I'm doing there. And in the dream, on the phone, I gave no response. So immediately her mind thinks I'm somewhere I shouldn't be with someone I don't need to be with. And so she wakes up from this dream in a place of just fear and anxiety. And so she rolls over and wakes me up at 1:30 in the morning with she calls me Joshy. And Joshy, she's waking me up. And what I like about that, Aaron, one of my takeaways is we actually teach that as what's called a gentle startup. She could have wakened me up a dozen different ways because she was really filled with fear and anxiety, but she woke me up with a really gentle startup in her conversation. She shares her dream with me, and I'll be completely honest with you guys. I was frustrated. I mean, it's 1:30 in the morning. I'm in the middle of my sleep. I get up very early, usually around 4. And so I'm in the middle of my sleep. But in that moment, I had the opportunity to allow how I felt, allow that dream, allow what my wife was experiencing to be conflict in our relationship. Or I had the opportunity to create connection. And so leaning back into the 6 needs, because I know my wife's number one need is certainty, that my needs weren't being met, but I had to make sure that I met her needs. So I came to my consciousness. I sat through it with her. I told her to explain the dream to me. I asked her how she was doing with it. She wasn't doing well with it. And we ended up talking through it. And I brought certainty into her by telling her, nothing's going on. I'm nuts about you. I hope you know that I'm nuts about you. Here's my phone if you'd like to go through it, because sometimes that can be helpful. If you just want to see what's going on, you're always welcome to it. And I met her bid for connection because she really needed that in the moment. She needed me to be present with her, even in the middle of the night, and be gentle with her, and I was. And so what happened with that is she even texted me this morning just thanking me for showing up the way that I showed up to bring her connection, to bring her certainty, to bring her just a feeling that she's the most important thing in my life.
That's good.
And so it was an opportunity to build connection, which I'm really grateful I chose that, because my emotional equanimity, Aaron, I had to open that box. In the moment, I was frustrated, I was exhausted, I didn't want to be bothered. I can be a bear when I'm woken up from my sleep.
Sure.
But just let that be a lesson to us that in the middle of any circumstance, regardless of what it is, you have the opportunity, if you know your needs, and especially if you're married or in a relationship, you know your partner's needs. Because I knew Brittany's needs were so high in certainty, I had the opportunity to show up and give her that. And the whole scenario in and of itself has now blessed us. We are way better today than we have been. We've been in a good place, but we're extra connected today, extra lovingly and gentle with one another because of that. So it builds patience.
I love that. And as we kind of wrap up and kind of tie a bow on this, when you think about this, when you know what your human needs are first and foremost, it gives you the self-awareness so you can show up for others. But think about the level of consciousness and kindness that Josh was able to do for Brittany, because he recognized that in that moment she needed to have a need met. And that's really how you build deeper relationship. Now, what could have happened, what probably happens more times than we can possibly count in a lot of relationships that are struggling with connection, they create conflict. In those moments, Josh could have rolled over, dismissed her, and said, it's just a dream, it's just a dream, go back to sleep, it's not a big deal.
Dreams are stupid.
Dreams are stupid.
They're not real.
It doesn't mean anything. And then that insecurity builds. And as that insecurity builds, it goes into the morning. Now the frustration, the irritation, and the fear expands. More insecurity starts to develop. And then now there's even more of a need that's not being met. Josh is now busy because he's got a busy day. He's got stuff he's got to do, but he doesn't connect. He doesn't recognize that Brittany's got a need that is unmet. So it creates more conflict, more separation, and eventually it's going to create this feeling where she doesn't feel like she can get her needs met with Josh, which potentially could have other consequences on the relationship.
So conflict not rectified with connection gives conflict the opportunity to mature. And that's exactly what would have happened. Today would be completely different. We'd probably be in very deep conflict, like you said, which I use the word conflict. You guys have heard this, but we'd likely be in a fight, a quote unquote fight. We go and we pick out our gloves, and it just, that cliff is steep and the fall is far. So, I'm really grateful it worked out the way that it did, but we had to choose that in the moment.
I love that. So, number one is you got to know your order. First and foremost, your 6 human needs, they come in an order. They're fluid depending on the dynamic or the domain that you're in. It could be your relationship or work. They're going to have a different order. But first and foremost, you got to know your number 1, number 2, so that you can identify where your needs are being met or not being met. Also, that goes directly into, if you're in a romantic relationship, you need to know your partner's number 1, number 2. That allows you to have healthy confrontation and healthy conversation so you can create better connection. After you know your order, you got to understand your roadmap. And so how are you meeting your needs in a healthy way or unhealthy way? And I think the unhealthy way might be earlier to identify early on in this process, but you need to understand, is your roadmap, your blueprint, your process, your template, is it healthy or not? Because it's not getting what you want. What's the effectiveness question that Pastor always says?
How's that working for you?
How's that working for you? So if your human needs are not being met because you have an unhealthy template, change the template. It's as simple as that. Understand your needs first and foremost. Understand, is your template is your temple getting you the effectiveness that you want, the results that you want?
Yeah.
And then the third part is have the consciousness to recognize how your human needs are affecting your relationship.
Because they certainly are. They'll show up every day of your relationship, every day of your life. I love that. Very powerful word today. And so we're grateful to be with you guys. Take this to heart. Listen to the podcast again. I know you're going to need to jot down notes, get to understand yourself, understand your roadmaps, and understand how those are woven together, especially if you're in a relationship.
Boom. Much love, many blessings. Talk soon. Peace.
Get off the podcast. Get back to the fucking mental lab.